Before we start, let's because we live in these days and times, and we pray for all of our staff and everyone who has been adversely affected by this virus. Let's have just a silent word of grace, particularly for Shanique and her family. If you would, let us pray for just a moment, for this day and for all that you've done for us. Lord, we bow to remember those persons who have been afflicted with this virus, and particularly we pray for members of our staff. We pray for them in such a way that they may feel your power and your presence. Be with us today as we go through and discuss this very important aspect of Bull Street. Lord, we ask it and claim it in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. What I want to do is, I know Chandler has a presentation, but I want our Assistant City Manager, Henry, if you would start us off.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Councilman McDowell, Councilman Duval, Councilman Davis. Thank y'all so much for providing us another opportunity to continue our discussions about renaming, of course, the Bull Street Park. And in our last meeting on January 14th, the recommendation from the committee was to allow myself, Robert Hughes, who is the president of the Hughes Development Corporation, along with Chandler Cox, their project manager, to develop a criteria for a public input process. In addition to the recommendations that we've already heard from Dr. Bobby Donaldson, and as well as Robin Waits. And of course, Robert Hughes was not able to join us on today, but of course we have Chandler Cox with us, and she will in turn present the recommendations or the proposal before the committee today. And I just want to thank Chandler as well as Robert for the dialogue that we've had to come up with this particular proposal for the committee. And in the absence of our city manager has reviewed this proposal as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chandler Cox to walk us through the actual proposal.
Great.
Chandler, just before you get started, I want to make sure the other council members have a copy of that, what you're going to be presenting to us today.
I've got it.
Sam, you got a copy?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Chandler. Go right ahead.
No problem. No, that's great to know that you guys have it, at least if not in front of you, but that you've seen it so far. And I want to thank y'all for allowing us the opportunity to come talk to you about the idea of soliciting public input for the Bull Street naming process. I know there's been a lot of work done by this team, by Robin Waits and Professor Bobby Donaldson on some other options too. And so we're really excited to sort of incorporate all those ideas and hopefully some public input too, to really have some great buy-in to the park. So what we have proposed, and we've worked with the Assistant City Manager Simmons and his team, is to do a sort of a three-step process or three phases as a Bull Street Park naming process. The first phase of that would be a public input period for ideas, similar to what the baseball stadium did. So in, I guess, 2015, the team started soliciting names, used a lot of the input that they got from the public when coming up with the Fireflies brand and the name for that. So I think it was a great way for the public to get involved, have a say in the project that is really going to be their park, and in that case was their ballpark. So excited to give people a chance to do that. And what we would propose doing is we actually purchased namebullstreetpark.com and have that be a bit of a form. So we would ask that people submit an idea for a name, whether it is a person or a, just a word like Citizens Park, which I know was brought up on this call last time on the 14th that I wasn't able to join, but just generate as many names as we can with those public input. And then we'll have a date that basically that gets cut off. So from there, we would work with the City of Columbia administration take out any names that might happen to be nonsensical or inappropriate, and then work with with Robin and with Dr. Donaldson and Historic Columbia and the USC Center for Civil Rights History and Research, as well as this committee and the city staff, to sort of cull down those names to about 5 or 10. And really that gives us an opportunity to highlight those 5 or 10 options and what that could mean to Columbia, a little bit of history about why they were chosen, if they might be a good fit. And then from there, we would work with the team to come up with some recommendations that would go to this committee, then to City Council. So that really is the meat of the proposal. You have it in front of you. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but really the goal for us was to develop a recommendation to the City Council for what we're currently calling just the Bull Street Park as its official names, engage the public for their input, be able to highlight key historic figures or any other naming options that could be great, and then really just drive awareness about the park itself too. So we get that community buy-in, and as soon as it's open, there are even more people out there than are using it now.
Now, Chandler, let me ask this question.
Yes, sir.
The other figures, in addition to the figures we, when I say the figures, the persons that we talked to with Robin Waits and Dr. Donaldson, are there any suggestions on your end in terms of, will that public input generate additional names?
I think the public input would generate additional names. So we would come up with sort of the public list, combine that with the lists that have already been put together, and then we can work with all the teams to sort of come up with 5 or 10 that may be good recommendations we can highlight and then also send forth.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, my only question was the time. Is the 105 days going to fit with when we need to get a name on it?
I'm not sure if that was a question for me or for Councilman Duval, but from our perspective, I think we can make that time frame work. It allows us, the ability to just have it named. Right now, the park is, people are using it, so it wouldn't preclude anyone necessarily from going out there. But.
Right, I used it this morning and took the walk and got run off by the geese.
Well, I'm surprised I didn't see you there. I was rushing in from Columbia just a minute ago.
Well, I'm glad it was geese that were after you, man.
I know.
They're eating all our grass seed out there.
Yeah.
But we got it going now.
Looking good. I'll tell you, it really is.
I have a quick question. So Councilman Duval, are you proposing that we shorten that time frame? I know that, at some point we want to do an official ribbon cutting, and of course the desire, of course, is to officially open the park up to the public definitely before the summer. So is that your question about maybe shortening the time frame, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that 105 suits me all right, but I wondered if it fit into your schedule, really, Henry, to get the name on the park. But as Chandler says, it's a useful park now with just the name Bull Street, and there were a lot of people, several dogs and geese and a couple of Duvals out there this morning. So I think it's being used. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest shortening it unless there is a real reason to have that name for an event that you might have scheduled. If you haven't got the event scheduled, we can wait till the 105 days is over and then schedule it later on.
We don't have anything scheduled. I think, we were going to leave that up to the will of this committee, and with a ribbon cut and kind of associating this with the name as well. So really, I would just like to make sure that we get it officially opened and do the grand opening, of course, before the summer hits, would be my thoughts.
Okay.
105 days would represent, what's the parameter? I know the parameter of time is 105 days, but we would probably be looking at, excuse me, the first part of summer, right?
105 days today would be June 10th. So we could, shoot for a middle of June event. And I believe that this has to go back to City Council for a full vote. I don't know if that's 1 or 2 readings, but we would need to, of course, just look at those scheduled meeting times. Make sure
Yeah.
that holds up, but
Right.
think-
It should be a resolution, so that will be one reading.
Say again, Patrick.
It should be a resolution, not an ordinance, so that should take one reading.
All right. So that handles that. That handles that.
it's a little
Okay,
easier.
One reading. And we're looking at somewhere around June 10th. Here, either early or afterwards, something like that.
You got two 15-day review periods in there too. It could be we could pick up some days by being ready to review the information after the 30 days so that we don't use an extra 30 days
Yep.
for reviewing it. That would move it up earlier in the summer. So if y'all could be prepared to get us in a scheduled meeting soon after the 30 days instead of waiting 15 days,
Sure.
that would speed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And instead of having a July opening, we might have a cooler June opening.
I think that's a great idea, Councilman Duval. And if we decide to go forward with this, it might be better to just go ahead and, calendar some meeting times, go ahead and get it out on people's schedules.
Yeah.
We do need some prep time to get everything together. And the first one is the setup of the 15 days, but to get, the website set up and everything, but we can certainly discuss shortening some of those time periods.
Yeah.
Well, I think it gives us the latitude to sort of be in a season of adjustment. I think we could adjust it in such a way that that Chandler, you guys could sort of do what you need to do within that parameter of time, and of course, be ready for a ribbon cutting. So I think. What do you all think? What do you think, Sam?
I'm okay with Henry's satisfaction of this, and I think the
Yeah.
timeline makes sense to me.
Yeah. After we get past the first 45 days, which is 15 days for the setup and 30 days for the public phase one, then the rest of those 60 days are really our schedule. So we can compress that by being more prepared to act promptly after the time limit is over and get it back to city council maybe in the May meeting.
So Patrick, I want to make sure, I think you're right, Howard. Patrick, I want to ask this. You're sure, well, I shouldn't say you're sure, I'm sure you know, but this is a resolution that only takes one reading, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Well, that puts us in the parameter of time where we want to be, and we don't have to do two readings on that.
Right. Well, I would suggest
Okay,
we
Sam.
go ahead and adopt the proposal for the Bull Street District as presented with the option of compressing those last 60 days according to staff and council schedule.
Okay. Henry,
Councilman McDowell, can I ask just a question for clarification?
hey, Robin. I think that,
how
hey,
y'all
Robin,
doing? Nice to see you.
hey, how are you?
I'm just
Good to
curious
see
about
Yes,
the,
ma'am.
I'm curious about the parameters, and this may be a question for Chandler, but when you asked us and Dr. Donaldson to put together a list of potential names, you asked us to focus on African-American history, people in the African-American community who had made contributions to the Bull Street campus. Is that still going to be part of the parameters for public input, or will it be a broader invitation to submit?
I'm happy to take that one, Councilman Duval. We are 100% supportive of naming the park after an African-American individual who is related to the site, but I think we want to solicit all the public input that may be out there that could be valuable and would potentially be worth considering.
So I would like, this is Pam Benjamin, Chief of Staff. My picture's doing weird things today. So I'm gonna just bounce off of Robin's comment. Just from my perspective, it's a little, I think we're going to, I'm afraid we're gonna go in some direction that's gonna take us away from the recommendations for the African American suggestions that we talked about before. You know, I'm all about public comment and public input, but I'm also concerned that it's going to take us in a different direction, and that you're going to get maybe a lot of feedback that's, you know, that's going to distract from going in that direction. And I'm just concerned about if you get, you know, a lot of feedback that's not related to a name of an African American for the park, how are you going to choose between some of those suggestions and the focus that we were going with the suggestions that Robin and Dr. Thompson made?
Well, my thought on that is that we need to open it up for any suggestion from the community. I think that clearly the city council has an inclination that it should be in honor of an African American or some neutral name like Healing Park or Citizens Park and other, that we could have an array of names there. And then it comes to, first it goes through the staff and your review, and then it goes to back to this committee, which I think the three of us are committed to coming up with the right thing. And then it goes to city council, which I think has a commitment to have an African American. But I don't think we ought to tell the public that that is the only thing we will consider.
Sam?
I could disagree with you on that one, Howard. I agree with Pam. I know that, I think we're not off base in demonstrating our commitment to public use. The leeway we have is to go in the direction that we originally agreed to go in, and that is to name it as after an African American, given the history of that property and the contributions that the people that we would consider have made, not only to that facility, but to Columbia in general. You compare the namings now with other names in this city, including streets. I think that has been a demonstration of the public having their say. But the original intent, I think if we deviate from that, we're gonna end up with more ingredients in the soup that we need to put in there. And it's not gonna provide any greater nutrition than what we're trying to get now. That's you.
And if I might, Mr. Reverend McDowell, I did make a meeting. You can always count on a great chief of staff and a great ACM to convey what needed to be conveyed from my perspective. So Pam has certainly done that. And I would just, I guess, and we're just here to give guidance, but you know, my guidance always comes from a place of what the original directives were from the entire council. And then you all went into committee. And so with those directives that were given and the input from Dr. Donaldson and Robin and those, I guess for me, I'm also trying to help you all have a process that is streamlined, but still provides an opportunity for the public to see and give input, but give input on what has already been presented in such a wonderful way. And I guess, quite frankly, if these are certainly the parameters that the council is trying to work around with African Americans who have had some tie to the site and or the broader healing type themes, I'm not quite sure what else you would be getting if you put it out there, if those are the parameters. I mean, the people that Dr. Donaldson and Robin suggested are so, I mean, they're so well done. They've done the homework, they've done the research. I'm you can never say you won't still get something on par with those names, but I think we'd be hard pressed to receive that. So if indeed that's what the council is trying to work around, I thought we were going in the direction to put those names out to the public and give, let the public digest those, give feedback on those, and go from there. I mean, you just have to be careful about saying what you want to do and where you want to land, and then putting something out so broadly as Pam's described, and then putting the staff in the position to then weed out things that have absolutely nothing to do with what your original intent was. Now, if y'all are going to be ready to help us explain that, and the Hughes Development is going to be ready to help explain that, then so be it. But I mean, I do have to stand up sometimes and say and remind everyone what the possibilities are there. And I'm not in big favor of being that person to have to weed all that out.
Howard? Yes. Howard?
Well, I'm sure that all of us agree that the council's direction was we need to find a suitable way to honor African Americans that had a significant part in the development of Bull Street property. And the list that Robin and Dr. Donaldson gave us is a good list, but I've gotten an email, I think it went to all the committee, from about Hilliard Bell. And I don't think that's on Robin or Dr. Donaldson's list, but it sounds like that family had an interesting contribution to Bull Street too, and it's an African-American family. So if we're gonna put it out to the public, I don't think we just ought to limit it to the names we already have. I think we ought, maybe if you want to state that we are looking for African-American connections to the development of the Bull Street mental health property, that will work. There may be African-American families that feel strongly that their granddaddy built the whole place and it should be named after.
And we just don't know about that. That's true, but from what I was hearing, that those parameters were not given as part of the presentation.
Well, initially, I'm sorry, go ahead, Howard.
Well, I would be perfectly happy if we bluntly state that the intention of the council is to honor the commitment and the progress made by the African-American people that helped develop Bull Street.
Yeah, and I think that would certainly be necessary to get the end product, as Ms. Wilson stated. I think you need to be very specific about what you're looking for if that's the case.
Well, one of the things I think I need to mention, of course, is that our original intent in our original conversation was to identify African Americans associated with the Bull Street project. That was the conversation. If anything, I would certainly sort of veer into the lane of saying if there are additional persons who are African Americans related to the Bull Street project, that would be fine. But I think, and I think we need to be very careful, because it can become, or has the possibility of becoming, very distracting in our original intent.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
If you don't mind me jumping in, I think.
Hey, Robert. Hey, how you doing?
I'm great. Great. I raced back from Columbia as well with Chandler, and I got in here in time as well to join. So I'm happy to see everybody.
Great. We're glad you hope you didn't get a ticket while you were racing. Thank you, sir.
They were looking for me, but they didn't find me.
I'm sure. Go ahead, Chandler. I'm sorry.
No problem at all. I just wanted to say we are not intending to replace any of the work that has already been done, and just wanted to add to that. I think we could make the commitment to help sort through all those names, understanding that there are going to be things that are not related or appropriate, that maybe still get to this smaller group for consideration. But the committee, the council members here are the ones who choose those finalists. So I don't know that there would be any harm in looking at other options, like the healing park that Councilman Duvall, or if somebody has a great idea like that, not precluding them from submitting it, because we've got an idea what we're looking for, and you all still have entirely in your ability to say these are the 5 or 10 that we want to choose. Maybe they all come from the list that's already been produced, but I don't know that we want to limit the ability for people to contribute from a public perspective.
Yeah, and I'll only add to that, because that's Chandler, and it is not the way we wrote that, and I talked to Henry about this numerous times as we wrote up these 3 steps, was the intent is not to go any other direction whatsoever. The intent is to go this direction. I know this is our 100% goal is to meet exactly the intent of what Dr. Donaldson and Robin were tasked with doing. Our thought and just the perspective was, if it's a really broad step 1, even with I like the idea of saying the intent is to honor an African-American of historic significance or group of, or make some statement about what the hope is for the name of the park. But if you start it really broad, you can hopefully get more interest, more people talking about it, more exposure. And then remember, all those names aren't going to ever be public. They don't have to be public. Maybe y'all will tell me otherwise, but Bull Street will be out soliciting the names. And then this committee, the group of 3 council members, will say, here are our 5 to 10 finalists. And those 5 to 10 finalists can be names, they can be themes, they can be anyone, and those are the only names that get published. And then we would take comments of those names, and those names would be the names that rose above all the others in your mind. But that was our intent. Our intent was really just to get very broad, lots of input. That input would come to Bull Street. We would then give that input, those answers, once it's sort of, these are names that are reasonable to name the park. Then this committee, with the help of Robin, Dr. Donaldson, the real experts in this field, says, here are the 5 to 10 we want to publish, we want to get actual feedback on. And those might be all 5 to 10 names that were on the original list. They might be 5 to 10 names that none of us have thought about, like the name Howard just mentioned. That will be your decision. That will not be our decision. But that was the intent. The intent, there is no intent whatsoever to move away from the directive or even remotely away from the work that Dr. Donaldson and Robin did. That work was phenomenal. It was really more of just, if we're going to do something big in public, why not? And if we're running this, which we're volunteering our time and our dollars to do, if we're running it, we want it to be as big as it can be, and then let it narrow down to this one champion name that we all get to celebrate with a big event. So that was the intent. And I hope that's clear, that there's not been any intent whatsoever by this proposal to move away. The goal is to just get an even more well-known, more energy, more excitement around what this park becomes.
Robert, what would be the one of the things that we've talked about even today? What about the whole notion of making this? Because we've already got names that we have listed names rather, and their contributions. Is there any way possible we could sort of narrow that down and say, from both you and Chandler, that this is an effort to engender African-American participation in the park, as you roll your piece out, Chandler. It would help us tremendously if we could say, because again, and I don't want to be redundant, but it could become very distracting based on the names we already have. Can we say that we're going to put out there perhaps African American names associated with the park? And that become an inclusive emphasis.
So I guess your sorry.
I'm sorry, Howard.
The way I see this possible going is we have two phases that are going public. Phase one will be an invitation for the public to help us name the park. We may want to put a caveat in there that the direction from the city council is that it needs to honor African American families or individuals that had a substantial part in the development of a mental health facility in Bull Street district. So we may get other African Americans that we don't have on the 15 that we already have identified at our last meeting. But then the committee gets together and limits that pool down to maybe 10 names. It says 5 to 10 names, but let's say we use 10 names. And we send that back out to the public in phase two to identify the people, to identify why they were chosen. And from that list, we get feedback from the public. And from that feedback, the committee gets back together again and either decides on a name to present to council, or one or two names or three names to present to council. I think that's the way it was designed to go. Phase two is taking the finalists, let's say the semi-finalists, and sending their names out to the public, why they were chosen as a semi-finalist, and see what the public has to say about that group. And we get back together again, and then we choose either one name or a couple of names to take to city council.
And one other piece of that, Howard, that I might be missing in this is this is not, I think what this is a private developer of the park running a public, will you help us develop a name that we will take to the administrative committee. We hope the administrative committee likes and then suggest to council.
Right.
This is not a city's running a naming contest. So I wonder if that helps the distinction. But if it doesn't, I mean, I'm just saying it. You guys could always come in and say, we're going to name it.
Let me say, Sam.
Yeah, it helps me understand it, Robert. And I think you're reminding us that it's a private development, and you know, the city really doesn't have a dog in that fight, to be honest.
But it's a public park.
It's going to be a city park.
So
but the name
is all clear.
Yeah. But the contest would be privately run with hoping for a recommendation for the public park. Is all
I don't know that was my understanding of it as when we were directed by the council. So no, Robert, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that. I'm not opposed to that's what the council wants to relinquish, because that's what they would be doing. I mean, quite frankly,
I thought that theme was in the write-up, but I haven't read it since.
I don't think we're relinquishing anything, because everything comes back to the administrative committee and to the city council.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Duvall, I think the way the conversation started then and all the work that we had asked for Robin and Dr. Donaldson to do was commissioned by the council directing staff to do that. And so had I known that it was more going in the direction of, which, you know, it doesn't matter to me either way, but you know me, once I get clarity and I've been given direction on how something's being done, then I want to see that through. Now, if I guess my question to Robert and Chandler would be then, would you have solicited the suggestions from Dr. Donaldson and Robin for your private developer commit, I guess, the way you're describing it, Robert. So I think that maybe we need to all work together as we have been and try to get a clear understanding on how the private developer running a big, broad campaign, and I understand why you would want to do that, then you would need to see all that through. Because the problem that, from my perspective, and just a little bit of having done this for a little while, wisdom talking here, you're putting the council and the staff in a position to still say, in not that much of a transparent way, if what I'm hearing you say is you would do the broad thing, and then we would never talk about all of the different suggestions that came from the public. So you want to solicit from the public, but then you want to narrow down in a way that maybe things were weeded out. And my advice on that always is start like you want to finish. Say what it is you're trying to accomplish with clarity and go down that path. And I think that's what Mr. Duvall just described in his 3-step approach, because it doesn't start, you put it out there, but you're still saying the parameters around what you're wanting to achieve. What I heard you say was you start very broad, but then we'll pick and then we'll put it back out there. So the question's gonna come to somebody is, how did you get there? How did you narrow them down? And if you're willing to answer that, fine.
Sure, and I think what we wrote said, and Teresa, to back up for briefly, we were not informed at all that Dr. Donaldson and Robin Waits were asked to do the work they did. So we feel like we came to the party a little late. And all we really asked for, and what we hope to do, is add value by driving up interest and by soliciting broader information. If the city wants, if the city wants us out and not to be involved at all, and that's what I'm hearing, that's fine too. It's just what we wanted to do. And it's much what the Fireflies did. The Columbia Fireflies, city-owned ballpark, they're leasing the ballpark, they're coming into Columbia, they want to be a part, they solicit broadly. They said, we would like names for what the new minor league baseball team in Columbia should be. Ultimately, they didn't release a single name that was submitted, and they said, we're going to be the Columbia Fireflies. What we thought is we'd go the same route. We'd say, we've got this, we, Bull Street Development, have just in partnership with the city built this wonderful new park. I like the idea of saying we would love to use this park to honor the work of African Americans on this site specifically, or we leave that out. It doesn't matter, because our thought was you take every name that comes in, we then whittle down, sit down with Robin, Dr. Donaldson, the administrative committee, Henry. We then say, guys, let's come up, what 5 to 10 do we all like on this list? Maybe they're all from the original list that was put together earlier. Maybe they're all new. We put those names out. Everyone, there's no voting. It's not who gets to vote. It's not any of those things. It's, here's feedback on them. Did you know that this person did this? Oh, we didn't know that. That's interesting. Oh, I like this. Hit something else. Then the committee says we take that data, and the Dr. Donaldson, Robin, the 3 council members say, here's the name we like. And in our minds, we've now gotten great press about Bull Street Park. We've gotten great press around these 5 to 10 names that I assume will all be either highly prominent African Americans or not, and or their names of, or not prominent, but should be. And so we get some press and we get to highlight some people the community doesn't know. Then we get, then we have a little time to think about that one name. And if that name is Citizens or something like that, we can tell that story. Then we get a big announcement. That was our goal from again, I'm thinking PR, I'm thinking highlighting the fun of Bull Street Park and highlighting the names of some people that a lot of people in Columbia might not know. And again, it all would be Hughes, Bull Street Development, running this through social media on its website, coming back to the administrative committee saying, here's what we're thinking. And the administrative committee saying, we don't like that name. We want this name. Why aren't we thinking about this? All the time providing input, and then they're picking. We wouldn't pick. It would be city council, that the council members on this call, that would pick and say, we want to recommend to the rest of our council one name that we've chosen. And if they say we hate this process, kick it out, that's fine too. I hope
Well,
that.
Well, the only
Well-
difference in the process is that we would take what was written on these 2 pages that we looked at today, and instead of having a broad net, anything goes for a name in phase 1, we would put in there specifically that the council is looking. The intention of the council is to name the park after significant contribution by an individual African American or a group of African Americans for the development of the park. And if we did that, I think we're being honest with the public. That is the intention of the council. They instructed us to go forth and find one, and we found 15 or so that are significant, most of which I have never heard of, but that they're very significant. And I think that we ought to go forth with the proposal from the Hughes to let them do a PR campaign for all the reasons that Robert said. But the council and the administrative committee, I think, still has control of the process. And I think it will help us all to get that type of focus on the park and on the Bull Street development.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to make very clear and I want to clarify 1 or 2 things you said, Robert. No, we don't want you out of this process. We don't want you out of it. We don't want you out of this process. But I think to have genuine conversation, I think we need to have it. I think we are very fortunate to have Robin and Dr. Donaldson to put together a list of names that has significantly contributed to the Bull Street Mental Institute, the grounds, whatever it is. I think we've got to be a little careful, though, not to negate the names that we already have listed, the 15, but also perhaps to look at other significant names that are African American that will and can contribute to the process. The 15 or so names that were talked about at our last meeting were names that significantly contributed to the Bull Street, to that whole effort there. So significantly, Robert, we don't want you and Chandler out of the process, but we also want Hughes to really look at, and I don't want to use this word loosely, but exclusively look at the possibility of African Americans who are going to contribute if there are additional names. The way the process works, of course, is that we will hear all of what you're saying. And of course, as a committee, we will deliberate among ourselves. And of course, we would ask for your input, but we will take that to the council for the council to make that blanketed decision. So I want it to be a collaborative movement, but I also want it to be, for lack of a better word, an African-American movement. Does that make any sense? Does it make any sense? I want it to be an African-American movement. I know that there are significant names everywhere.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure that we're not distracted in the work that Robin and Dr. Donaldson has done for us. Yes, sir.
Oh, I have an idea.
Yes, sir.
Would one idea be to put and we asked, I don't think I've seen the presentation. I want a copy of it because I wrote feverishly, but I didn't get all the details of it. So I hope that that'll be shared with us at some point soon. But that presentation from Dr. Donaldson and Robin, perhaps we say, this is our goal. Our goal is to honor, is to have, I loved your term, it's been African-American movement, it's been African-American park. This is our goal. Here's where you can solicit. And while you're thinking about what you want to submit, look over here at these 15 names that Dr. Donaldson and Robin Waits in Historic Columbia have put together as their suggestions and why. And then they can come back and say, God, Thompson Park, that is it. Here's why, here's another idea. Or, I mean, it changes it a little bit because one person won't be the person who picks the name of the park, because they'll be given suggestions. But because I do probably think that the name of the park ultimately comes out of the work that Robin and Dr. Donaldson did. But, you know, we're not running a democratic process. This is not a, this is not a winner take all, who gets the most votes. I mean, that's not what this is. This is a public, you may provide input, and public, you know, you have a say, but, or you have the ability to have a voice, but there's no vote for the public on this. So we could put those names there. There are a lot of things we could do. For us, it's just all been about, you know, we're not going to come back to you guys with our 5 to 10 names. We're going to come back to you guys with all the names that we think might work, and y'all are going to say what the 5 to 10 names are. I feel like there's just been some wire crossed in what we proposed and what we wrote, and maybe we didn't write it right. And I hate it, because it feels like there's some sort of miscommunication in what it is we're trying to accomplish. And I hate that, because I wish it's not that way. But
It's not that way, Robert. I think the difference is you're a private developer and we're a public entity that has to, in my role, make sure we are truly transparent and answering to the public. And have, like I said, having done this many times when you're soliciting information from the public, the only difference I see is the thought to be very broad and not be specific in what the ultimate goal is. I mean, if that's the goal, if that's the direction, then say that's what it is, so that people know when they're making additional suggestions, the type of suggestions to make. I mean, I don't think we're that far off at all if that's the understanding that you have as well. I mean, that the reason it's come up and has gone in the direction we're going now is because that wasn't the way it was stated when you gave the presentation. And I wanted to just say, Mr. Chair, I don't know what happened to Mr. Davis. I don't know if the clerk can, or did he say originally that he had to jump off?
No, he didn't.
Sure we
Say
need to
anything.
try to get him back on
Erica.
if Erica's listening.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am, I'm working on that now.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And Teresa, I think if we had done a better job in the write-up explaining that our thought is the only reason it was broad it was twofold. Henry and I actually talked about this. It was cast a real wide net. It doesn't, the transparency piece, and I don't have that lens to view this through at all, but I also view this as the Fireflies had no obligation to share what all the submissions were. And then to come back.
Robert, this is Patrick.
Yeah, I don't think the Fireflies is the same scenario.
Right.
Everything that is permitted, everything that you present to this committee is public.
Oh, of course.
So there's no.
So the Fireflies may not have had to say every name submitted, but every name submitted to the Administrative Policy Committee is public.
Correct. And every name we submitted to the committee, I completely understand that. I'm saying if the directive from the Administrative Policy Committee is, Robert, you cast a wide net, only give me names that are of historic African significance or are, as Howard Duvall said, thematic. Only give us those names. Those are the only names you'll see. So I don't have the same lens you guys have. For us, it was cast a really broad net, let it be every type of name you could think of. And then the Administrative Policy Committee says, we only want names like this. And then we respond by saying, okay, we got 1,000 names, 150 of them fit what you're saying. Here you go.
Well, that seems like an exercise in, they've already said what they want. So that's my only difference there is cast this wide net, get any and everything you want for what?
Well, to me, it was a benefit of getting a lot of press and getting it broader and having more, hopefully, more people pushing in and then saying, oh, look, this is the direction it's going versus
Well, I would hope that the citizens of Columbia would be just as excited about getting around soliciting names that have been made very clear as to what the council is looking for. I mean, the same excitement can be there. We're still asking for suggestions.
I hope that I agree 100%.
So everybody will feel comfortable if we, in our first broad net, specifically say that we are looking for African Americans that had a significant contribution to the Bull Street development.
That's correct.
Is all right with you, Madam City Manager?
Yes, sir. I mean, that's all I was ever saying. So
okay.
Yeah, that's
from the last couple meetings.
Believe it or
Robert,
not,
that okay with you, Robert?
Of course.
Okay.
We work for you guys.
Yeah, I could have made this. What I was trying to say is exactly what Ms. Wilson and Howard was alluding to is, and I said very loosely, an African American movement. It's certainly my contention, and I think consensually, Howard, I don't know where Sam is, but I'm sure he would probably agree with us that the movement is of such that we wanted to see other African American, if there's a desire to create another list. And Robert, one of the things I think I heard you say is that you did not get the whole presentation from Dr. Donaldson, and you didn't get that whole presentation.
Get Erica to send him the list.
I was going to suggest that that list be forwarded to both you and Chandler, just for information. Look at that list because there may be duplicative names on that list. So we could very well do that. If we could come up with, our committee, of course, is charged with the responsibility of doing the fiduciary thing, and that is naming of the park there. And I understand Ms. Wilson's concern. And the more I think about it, the more talk I need to have with someone. We're looking at private development in a public park. And we did not have that conversation, but it will certainly be a conversation that I think, well, it doesn't need to be a conversation because that's the law. So please, let us rally around a common theme that we want the park, we would like for the park to be centristic in our naming of the park in terms of an African American name. Yes,
Chairman,
yes, sir.
I was in error when I said that the list did not include Hilliard Bell. It does include Hilliard Bell. They spelled the name differently than his family did, and I didn't catch that till I was further reviewing it.
We'll review it some more. You may see something else you didn't.
I know. So are we set?
I think for the record, Mr. Chair, Madam Clerk would just like someone to articulate with the next steps. And I don't know if Henry wants to take a stab at that.
Henry, would you?
Yeah.
Well, Henry, just before you, Chandler, the document that you submitted, phase 1, phase 2, and 3 is inclusive of Robin and Dr. Donaldson. Is that correct?
Correct. So phase 1 would just be public input. Phase 2 and 3 would be all in conjunction with Robin and Dr. Donaldson.
All right, I got you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Henry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just suggest that the appropriate revisions be made to the current proposal as we're describing, to particularly be intentional about what our end goal is and have that resubmitted for review and finalization. And of course, Robert and Chandler, of course, and we had initial discussion about this, but once that comes before this committee, as we work through the process, that of course, it is a proposal and it does come with changes as the council has just described. So I would just say that let's revise it based on what we've discussed and get that back for final review to move forward.
And
Okay.
Henry, could you go ahead and set a schedule so that we can maybe shorten the time using the 2 15-day review periods and shorten them up to a week or something like that, so we can get this thing done before it gets too hot out there?
Yes, sir. I'll work with Chandler and Robert on that. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else? Robert, Chandler, thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you, Ms. City Manager. Robin, thank you so much. Henry, you're our go-to person, and we thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good
Thank
day.
you, Reverend
Thank you so much,
McDowell.
Reverend McDowell.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
you.
Thank
See
you. Y'all have a good day.
Bye-bye.
You too.